This is Harvey Oyer III. It's the 15th of September 2002, and I'm with my aunt, Lois Patricia Oyer Dooley, who lives in Tucson, Arizona. We're at my home at 800 Claremore Drive in West Palm Beach. She is back home visiting for a week. Aunt Lois, I wanted you to tell the story of when you saw a German U-boat surface when you were a child. Do you recall the year and where you were, and describe the events surrounding it?
I don't recall the year, but I was babysitting. I used to ride my bike over the bridge to the home of these wealthy people who had their home next to the Boynton Casino. And my job was to take care of the two children. So every morning after we got through in the house, we would go down on the beach to play. We were playing on the beach when all of a sudden I looked out and I saw this submarine surface. It was so close you could see the people walking around. And the reason I knew it was a German sub because they had a swastika on a flag there, and they were looking at us with binoculars. I was just really terrified. I grabbed the children up. I ran into the house, up the beach to their home. I got inside and there was no one there, and except one of the cooks, and I said, "Oh, there's a German sub out there." And they went and looked and they confirmed. And when I got home that afternoon, I said to my mother, "You'll never believe what I saw." And I told her about it. They didn't know really what to think, but they accepted my story. Later, my uncle, Walter Voss, who was in the Coast Guard, came up that weekend, and I told him about this, and he was so upset that I hadn't called the Coast Guard because that night, that particular sub sunk a freighter not too far from where I had seen it, and he thought that it could have been averted, and of course maybe it could. But being a kid, I didn't really know at the time, and not everyone would believe what you were telling them. However, it was quite an experience, and I have never forgotten looking out and seeing that German sub with all the sailors walking around looking at us on the beach.
Would there have been a way to communicate this to the Coast Guard? Did this home have a telephone?
They had a telephone there, but you could not get through. So I said to my uncle, there was no way that a child, a teenager, could get through to the Coast Guard. So he did give me a number and what to say in case I ever had another experience like that.
Do you know the name of the freighter that was sunk and where it was sunk? I know we had several off Palm Beach County's
We had
coast.
several, but I do not recall that. Charlotte might.
And was it sunk the same day or
That night.
that night?
I saw the sub that day, that morning really, around noon. Took the children in, and it was that night later that freighter was sunk.
And where was Uncle Walter stationed
He
at?
was stationed out of Fort Lauderdale in that area with the Coast Guard. It was called, what was that? It was in that area down below Fort Lauderdale. They had a Coast Guard station there.
Why would the Germans surface a vessel where they could be seen?
Well, according to Uncle Walter, he thought they surfaced there because we were such a small town that there was nothing that, to them, that would be, like if they went to Palm Beach or if they were in Fort Lauderdale near one of the bases.
So it looked like a remote place to surface.
It looked like a remote place, and so, when you see the periscope coming up, you stand there and you think, I can't believe this.
Did you see the periscope come up before the boat surfaced?
Yeah, before it surfaced. And evidently they looked and they saw nothing but these homes there, and there weren't that many at the time,
And the homes were right on the beach, dune?
Yeah,
so,
right next, there was the Boynton Beach Casino, and this was a big home right next to it.
On which side of the casino?
On the south side.
South side.
Mm-hmm. And it looked like a vacant area, more or less, with just a few homes, and because no cars were driving by.
How far offshore in feet or yards do you think it was?
Well, it came in quite close because I could see the people walking around. So it couldn't be that far away.
Less than a mile offshore.
Oh, yes, it was in as close as they could get. But of course, the sandbars and things, and then there was a big drop. So it was, could be fairly close and not have have the water depth that they needed and still not be that far offshore.
Did you ever see one again after that?
I never saw one again.
And I assume you were more conscious and looking for them afterwards?
I was looking every time I went on that beach because it was kind of a terrifying experience to look up and see them watching you. And they could see that I had grabbed the children up and ran in because I didn't really know what they, could do. Later on, they started patrolling the beach with
horses, didn't they?
Horses and back and forth. So maybe that's one reason that area was no longer.
And they patrolled it with horses because if they had a motorized vehicle, they couldn't hear them surface. Is that it?
I don't know why they did it, except, the beach sand is very difficult. And so they couldn't use any kind of, vehicle on it. So it would have to be with horses that could plod through that sand because at the time it was much more sandy than it is now.
And now what year were you born?
I was born in 1928. This was, so let's see.
Was my father still in high school at this time?
Mm-hmm.
Or had he gone to the Philippines?
Let's see. I don't recall when that was.
But you would have been in the 14, 15,
yes,
16
because
range?
I remember when, in 41, I was how old? 28, 38?
You were 13?
13 when the war, because I remember coming down the street that Sunday and one of our neighbors called to us and said, "Did you know they attacked at Pearl Harbor?" And we didn't have a TV at the time, and so we ran home. It was a Sunday, I can remember when we heard that. And we ran home to tell them about Pearl Harbor being attacked. And it was years so after that, so I had to be like 14 or 15. And at the time, at that time, I then became an airplane spotter. And Jeanette Leverance and I would ride our bicycles over to the inlet, and they had this.
Was the inlet where it still is today?
Right, where it is today, and the Army had built this little thing, and we'd climb up in there, and we'd sit there for our amount of hours, and we would spot for airplanes, and every time we saw a plane, we had to decide what kind it was, and we had a direct phone from there to the Air Force, and we would tell them what plane and where it was approximately, and so every airplane in that area, and they had around.
Why did we have enemy aircraft in our airspace?
Not that I know of, but they had these
preventative measures.
It was a preventive, and we had, they had torpedoed ships off of there. We saw the freighters on fire. We saw people brought into the inlet, stretched out that were burned, and these different things. So I guess this is the reason the government put this up there, just to prevent any.
And any civilian was allowed to participate, or did you have to go through some sort of training?
You had to learn how to recognize all the airplanes and what they were, and.
You did this in high school?
We did this in high school.
After school?
After school, we'd ride our bikes over, and we had like a 2-hour stretch.
That's a long ride all the way up to the inlet.
That's right.
We're talking about the South Palm Beach County Inlet, otherwise known as the Boynton Inlet, which if you went over the Ocean Avenue Bridge in Boynton, that's several miles north.
And then went up there, and we rode our bikes up there, and we checked in, because you had to check in, and then when they came to
Where was this tower?
It was on the
north side of the bridge?
North side of the bridge up there, and they had built it.
East on the beach side?
Right on it was on the, here's the bridge, and it was right down in there. And
on the beach side or the west side?
West side of that.
Down where the parking lot is today.
And it was up high so that you would be up, and you climbed up in there, and you checked in, and you spotted airplanes. They had the binoculars, and they had the telephones there and everything.
And they let children do this?
Well, they didn't have many people that were capable of going over there, going through the schooling and learning this. So, we were like 14 or 15. We didn't think we were that much of, at that time, that wasn't considered
Too young to
too
do
young
this.
to do these things. Because number one, they had to be able to bike over there because gas was rationed and everything. So it was quite a trip, biking over there.
Is there a sidewalk?
No,
I don't-
right we biked on the street and all the way over, and we would check in and spot airplanes and call them in if any were flying by. And of course, we were up high enough that we could look out on the ocean. And of course, we always glanced out there to see if anything was going on. But this was after I had, so I must have been like maybe 13 or so when I saw the German sub. It was shortly
After.
Mm-hmm. And then after that, I went into spotting airplanes and doing that. It was
Pretty exciting thing for teenagers to be
Yes,
doing
it
in their
is.
spare time.
That's right, but I can remember we would wake up at night with our beds shaking from the depth charges going off.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
When the U.S. naval or Coast Guard vessels thought they found a German sub, they would drop the depth charges.
That's right, and
it would shake the house all the way back
all
on
the way over to
Seacrest?
where we were on Seacrest.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
And was it the Coast Guard dropping them or the Navy?
That I don't know.
Probably
It
the
was in-
Coast Guard.
But the Coast Guard was very active in that area, because they were a very active bunch at that time because of all the action going on over there.
And you had other uncles that were also in the Coast Guard
Yes.
other than Uncle Walter?
Uncle Walter, Uncle Gilbert, and Uncle Frederick.
Were they all in Florida waters?
No, Uncle Frederick went to Europe, and Uncle Gilbert went to the South Pacific.
In the Coast Guard?
In the
So they
Coast Guard.
forward deployed the Coast Guard, which
Mhm.
today is just kept
It's
protecting
yeah.
the U.S.
Yes, where over there they were in, as I said, Uncle Frederick went into France. He brought a cross back that he'd gotten there for us, and then Uncle Gilbert brought back some seashells that he had gotten in the South Pacific. What was interesting was we had not heard from Gilbert for a long time, and then one of the ladies at church whose son was over there said he saw the boat that the ship that Gilbert was on had been hit by a Japanese kamikaze. And so it was sometime later when we finally heard that he was okay. And during that period of time, we were, of course, very upset. But all three of the brothers came back and got out of the Coast Guard. They had all gone down and enlisted at the same time.
Now, the fourth brother, Charles, was he too old at that time?
He was a minister, had a family, and did not go in.
That would exempt him?
That would exempt him. And the three other brothers went into
Were
the
they
Coast Guard.
single at the time?
Yeah. If Uncle Frederick
May have been married
may
by
have
then.
been married, but, he married
Several times.
times. So,
Now, didn't Uncle Walter also, I don't know if he was stationed in New Orleans or just
Mhm.
visited New Orleans,
he was stationed there.
because my father told me one time, and I don't know if you can confirm this, that he was walking through the streets of New Orleans and
Mhm.
someone yelled, "Voss."
That's right, and he turned around.
But yet he couldn't have known anyone there because he had never been there before. But there was I believe a John Voss
Who had gone there.
who had gone to Louisiana, decades earlier
Mhm.
in the 19th century as a mercenary in the Confederate Army for one of the Louisiana
Mhm.
militias, and perhaps he looked enough like Uncle Walter. Uncle Walter looked enough like him that
They
someone
thought
recognized
they
him as a
recognized
Voss.
as a Voss and yelled, "Hey, Voss!" And he turned around, and then, of course, they both realized they didn't know each other. Yes, we've always heard that. Mhm.
Well, I wonder if that's coincidence or true, but I'm pretty distantly related to Uncle Frederick and Uncle Walter because they're
Mhm.
great uncles of mine.
Yeah.
And I've seen photographs of them at my age, and I'm a dead ringer for them. In fact, Trish Voss sent me a picture of her father,
Mhm.
and
Frederick.
when my secretary opened it at work, she thought it was a picture of me until she read the date on the bottom.
Mhm.
And that would be just about the same sort of relationship that Uncle Walter would have had to this John as being a great nephew.
That's right.
And so if I could be a dead ringer for Walter or Frederick, maybe he could have been
More
a
for
dead
Frederick,
ringer.
I would think. And so it had to be someone that had been a relative, and for them to pick up on it down there. And y'all boss.
Any other wartime memories that you can share?
Well, of course, we all rolled bandages. We did a lot of canning. I don't think people realize how difficult it was. We were on rationing. And
What was rationed? What sorts of items?
you know, we had to save up our coupons to get shoes and to get clothes. And I can remember down in front of the school, they had all this metal. Everyone tried to find junk metal, and they would bring down and add to the pile. And then all of us took the gum wrappers and peeled the tinfoil off, and we made them into large balls of solid tinfoil, and those were turned in.
And someone would come by and
Come
pick
by
this
and
up?
pick this up.
And where was this piled at?
Down in front of well, it's now the Children's Museum there in Boynton.
In front of the 1913 school?
Mm-hmm. And there was this huge, pile of where people would bring their junk metal and put in there. And then, of course, we learned to knit.
Do you have any recollection of the airfield in Boca Raton or Morrison Field in West Palm Beach?
Oh, I do.
Or the breakers being used as a hospital?
I worked one summer at Boca Raton as a clerk typist. I went down, I was 16 years old then, and passed the test and was hired as a clerk typist in the typing pool. And so
For the Army airfield?
Mm-hmm. And so I would go down there, and you would go through, and you had your clearance, and they'd drop me off. Daddy was working down there at Boca Raton at the time on the airfield, and he would drop me off, and I'd go in, I'd sit down, and I would type all day long. And then when closing time came, I would get up and go out, and Daddy would bring me home.
Now, what was he doing down there?
He worked down there for some years.
Building as a carpenter?
Mm-hmm.
Building what? Army barracks or?
I don't know. He never discussed what he built.
Now,
And so we'd go down together
and ride home together.
and ride home together. And
You went down US 1?
Mhm. And I was 16 years old, and I went in to take the test, and everyone in there was much older, and they all looked at me. But of course, being a typing poodle, all you had to do was pass the test, which I did over some of the others, and was hired and worked down there that one whole summer as a clerk typist at Boca Raton. So we were very familiar with that base.
Did you know what was going on at that base at the time?
Well, you were not supposed to really discuss anything with the people. So all I knew was the paperwork that I was typing and putting out, and not really too much of the other, because it was a total different concept. No computers, and we used carbon paper because of the type of. We're talking about all these many years ago, and it was a.
Did you have a security clearance?
Oh yes, you had to, in order to work there in that.
Well, in the last year, it's been publicized in our local newspaper, the Palm Beach Post, that crop-killing chemicals were developed or at least experimented with at that Boca Raton airfield that could be dropped in Western and Central Europe to kill the wheat and corn fields. And there was some concern as FAU expands and this area that has been largely undeveloped, that it could have some residual chemical warfare agent on it.
Well,
were you ever aware of that?
I was never aware of it, and I never got sick from anything of that type, and I have lots of allergies that I would have thought if there was something like that going on, that just being down there on the base, that I might have picked up something, and I never was sick from that, and I never heard anything about that. Not saying it didn't happen, but I wasn't aware of anything like that going on.
Did
No.
you ever hear of a German prisoner of war camp out in the Glades?
Well, no, but we knew Yamato was where all the Japanese had settled and built this little town there of Yamato. And
That was actually a town?
that was actually a town at that time.
Okay.
And I know that they came in there and investigated that because they said some of those farmers had really been officials in the Japanese Navy, and they had come and settled and made this little farming community, and they called it Yamato.
Right.
And so now when I was working at Boca Raton, we were in this kind of wood barrack type building, and we were lined up, the desk down two sides and with a middle, and lightning struck and hit one side of that building, and I can remember they took all those people out to the hospital, and all of us sitting across on the other side were just in a state of shock. I do remember that.
Because it just as easily could have been you.
It could have been our side. Mm-hmm.
Any other memories of World War II as it affected Southeast Florida? Did my father, who was 2 years older than you, do any of this?
He worked on the platforms
loading produce
and things like that. But he went, you must understand, he went into service when he was 18. They allowed him to graduate from high school because he was within just a few 2 months of graduation. And so,
why were many boys sent away if their birthday was earlier in the year and they had already turned 18?
I don't know about that, but Harvey was valedictorian. He was and they wanted him to finish. Because he was 2 months late leaving, he was put into a really a group of people that were not too great that he went through basic training with. Where if he'd have probably left earlier, like his friend David Mayberry, he would have been in a totally different type of group. But he survived it and did just fine. And I can remember that when he went off, when he finally came back, we had been sitting at the dinner table, and Mother said, "Now I want everything eaten up. We don't want, any leftovers." And so we had just finished that when the back door opened, and we heard Harvey come in and said, "Is there anything for supper?" And we all just nearly fell off of our chairs.
He was coming back from basic training, and you didn't know he was coming back?
We didn't know he was coming. And we were just really stunned. But Harvey went through basic with a group that were pretty tough characters, but he survived it, went on, and they had told him when he went overseas to the Philippines that one out of so many would come back. And I said, "Well, how did you feel when they told you the odds?" He said, "Well, I thought I was the one coming back." So he had a positive attitude.
Well, that's an interesting thing to bring up. My father doesn't seem to get stressed very easily now.
No, because...
Was he like that then?
He never got stressed out. As I said, he said, "Well, I thought I'd be the one, to
So
come
he's
back."
always been that way?
He's always been that way.
Because he's very haphazard in his behavior. He forgets to lock doors. And whenever we admonish him that you're going to get broken into or you're going to get mugged, he always says, "It won't happen to me." And for some reason, it never has happened to him.
I know.
So he's either very lucky or
I don't know if it's his positive attitude or just what it is, But I can remember when he was going through basic, David Mayberry said, they were crawling down on their, going under the wires and this and that, and that he was near the last to finish the course. And then when they got up and to do it again, they used live ammunition firing over him, and he was one of the first to get through. So it was a total different concept from when he was going through the first time with no ammunition being fired, and when he went through the second time. So I guess when push comes to shove, he
moves along.
He moves along.
Any other stories that you can think of?
After...
Now, your father was too old to go back to World War II.
Yes, he had served in World War I. And I can remember he said on the way over he was so seasick that he begged everyone to let him wear their heavy loads of ammunition because he said if the ship went down, I wanted to sink immediately because he had been so seasick. But Daddy was over there and fought there in France in the trenches, and one of the few things he ever talked about was the mud and how awful, the mud was. But I do know that for years, when Armistice Day, November 11th came, we all sat down at 11 o'clock because this was a very important thing to my father because he had been there in the trenches when the armistice was declared on November the 11th at 11 o'clock. So for years we all sat there and observed that because of Daddy.
Did he ever tell you about his experiences? And he was only in France, correct?
He was in France. He never said a lot. I'm sure it was a very tough time because it's hand fighting over at that time when he was
He was about 25 when he went.
So I think he just tried to erase it from his mind. But I know Mother said one time that in the middle of the night there was this huge noise and Daddy jumped up in the bed and jumped clear over her and the baby crib and everything, which would have been Harvey in the crib, and out the front door before she could even, get his attention that he wasn't being shelled or anything like that. So it was still on his mind, even that much longer. But he never really discussed it. He probably said more to Harvey when he was getting ready to go overseas than he did ever. It was just something.
Did he keep any of his uniforms around the house?
Daddy had his gas mask, his tin hat, and all of this, and it used to be out on that east porch, and we used to play with it. And we came home, and he had done away with all that, and that was just before he died. It was like he knew he was not going to live, and he just did away with all of this.
That would have been when I was a child, in the 70s.
Yeah, and I remember the gas mask hanging there, and we used to see it, and play with it in his tin hat.
I have the hat.
Do you have the hat?
It was very rusted.
Yes.
Terribly rusted because it hung out in the garage for 30 years. And the rust was going to eat it through, and I went and had it sandblasted to get the rust off. And then put a coat of the olive drab paint back on it with its original color.
But he had the gas mask hanging there.
I never saw that, I don't think.
No, he threw it away. But we grew up seeing that, there. And
so what, he got rid of the uniforms as well?
He got rid of everything. And it's too bad because we were in a museum a couple of years ago and we sat, and they needed, for that slot in that period in the museum, they said they hadn't been able to get anything. And I said, just think, Charlotte, if he hadn't have thrown that away, this would have been great for, in the museum. But
do you remember your mother's cousin, Chuck Pierce?
Oh, yes.
Now, he was also an adult with adult children, but he, and a World War I veteran, but he went back to World War II.
He was in World War II, and he was stationed overseas, and he was on the D-Day planning. And when Stephen, was...
Stephen Voss,
your cousin, when he was wounded, he was in that on Omaha Beach going in, and everyone in his unit was almost
Was
killed.
he on one of those landing crafts that was hit as soon as the door opened?
And he was wounded, and so he was on this ship, and I can remember when he came home, he said, I was sitting there with all these dead bodies, and I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and he was being sent back over to England to the hospital. And he got there, and he was in the hospital, and Grandma, of course, wrote to Chuck Pierce and said to him that he had to go up and look up Stephen, because Stephen had been wounded and was in the hospital. And Stephen said he looked up one day, and all this, here comes this lieutenant commander with all of his stuff in, and all these people, and everyone, and of course Stephen was a seaman first class. And everyone in the hospital, their eyes got big. And he came in to see Stephen and see how he was doing because Grandma had written him and said, you must go up and see Stephen. And Stephen said, you can't imagine what it was like. Everyone says, how did you know him? And he said, oh, my grandmother wrote him, told me to come up. So it was,
Do you know where Stephen was in a hospital? And where
whereabouts
Chuck was?
in England? No, I don't.
Do you know where Chuck was stationed?
Well, I think he was down there around Daphne de Mary's home. And I think they had taken that over as headquarters or something at that time.
I'm not sure where he was, but I understood that Judge Chillingworth was in this same building as him.
Mm-hmm.
And I once talked to Tommy Joe Woolbright, who
That's
told
right.
me that he stopped in to see Judge Chillingworth, and
Mhm.
Chillingworth said, on your way out, stop 2 doors down, you'll see Chuck Pierce
Chuck
also.
Pierce, mhm.
And all 3 of them had grown up together.
Oh, yeah. And, of course, they'd gone to school, Judge Chillingsworth and
Chuck Pierce were same class.
Chuck Pierce used to drive the car that picked up like Mother and the different ones and brought them up to Palm Beach High School, and then they would drive him back. And he drove it because he was in Boynton, and it was the furthest away on picking him up.
So you had a lot of relatives participating in World War II. You had
A lot.
you had your older brother late in the war in the
Harvey.
South Pacific. You had your mother's 3 brothers, Walter, Frederick, and Gilbert, all in the Coast Guard, one in the Pacific, one here at home, and one in
Mhm.
Europe.
And Donald Moore.
And you had
He was in the Marine Corps, and he was in the South Pacific.
and Chuck Pierce,
Pierce was there, and he
and
was
Steve Voss. So that
and
is
Stephen.
virtually every male member of the
Mhm.
family except your father and
Who had
your
served,
uncle Charles
yeah.
Voss, who was a minister with the family.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mhm.
amazingly, every one of them
And
came
every
back.
one of them came back, and they were all except for Uncle Walter in action, and yet all of them came back.
That's pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for sharing these stories with me. I wish you were here long enough for me to tape a lot more.
Oh, thank you.